Greetings all, Ferrari 601 here. Welcome back to Assetto Corsa and welcome to the showroom for this first look and I suppose semi-review, not a full-on 18-hour review like I typically do sort of thing, of this, the latest product from RaceSim Studio, Formula RSS 2013 V8. This car has been a big gap in RaceSim Studio's portfolio for the last few years, and it has been one of the most highly requested cars that RaceSim Studio make. They have finally made good on that, filling that gap in the what I call the Halo cars lineup of RaceSim Studio in their classics content. In 2018, we got RSS Formula 2000 V10, which was the first in this classics line. Utterly fantastic recreation of a 2000-era Formula One car. V10 engine, 600 kilograms dry, and, 800 horsepower at 18,000 RPM. 3 years on, that thing is still quite the experience, and it does still try to kill you every single time you drive it. We also, in the last couple of years, 2020 this time around, we got Formula 1990 V12, a recreation of the Ferrari 641 from the 1990 season. Another fantastic experience, although entirely different in terms of its performance characteristics from the Formula 2000. It does almost exactly the same lap times on the limit. So, two different manifestations of the physics, but very similar results on track. This one, though, this one is coming from a time much closer to our own. This one, it's patterned after the 2013 Formula One regulations. A lot of people have already come out to say that, well, this is a Red Bull RB8, RB9 from the 2012-2013 season. No, it is not. This is a Formula RSS 2013, thank you very much. Yes, it does have a lot of the features that we came to see from the Red Bull cars of this era. However, probably the most distinctive and distinguishing feature that shows you that it's not a Red Bull is the front end right here. Have a look at this. That's just one single continuous curve going from the nose tip all the way up to the cockpit. The Red Bulls had step noses in 2012 and 2013. This one does not. That's not to say that they did not take some other styling and design cues from the Red Bulls of this era, but it is not a recreation of an RB8, RB9, I will have you know, thank you very much. It is rather an amalgamation of all of the best features of Formula One cars from 2010 through 2013. I suppose you could say it is a closest match to a 2013 car, and of course the name would suggest that very much. However, it is an original design through and through. What you do get here, other than it not being a recreation 100% of a Red Bull, is you get a fantastic representation of the beginning of the last decade of Formula One technology. 2.4-liter V8s had come into the series beginning in 2006, and of course they had been continued through 2009 and the tremendous raft of regulation changes that had been instituted for that season. But for 2010, we had another adjustment to the regulations. Refueling had been banned, which necessitated longer and overall heavier cars. This thing weighs in at 642 kilograms without fuel on board, mind, but with including the weight of the driver. But we still have 770 horsepower from the 2.4-liter V8 carried over from 2006 through 2009. Rev limit had been knocked down to 18,000 RPM again, which is where this one is. However, 770 horsepower, 310 newton meters of torque, a lot of performance potential, given that this car still only weighs 642 kilograms. Compare that to the 2022 Formula One regulations, where we're seeing 780 plus kilograms. And of course, when you add fuel on board, you're pushing 900 kilos at the start of the race, which is, that's something to complain about for another day. However, we have got 581,534 triangles comprising this thing, 237 total objects, those stats from Content Manager, and we've got ourselves yet another fantastic RaceSim Studio product and a much awaited and I believe much necessitated addition to the RSS Classics line. Just having a look at some of the modeling work that they've done here. RaceSim Studio, in addition to producing cars that are always fantastic to drive and cars that always sound fantastic, as this one certainly does, and you'll hear that in a few minutes, they also produce cars that look absolutely fantastic, and this is not an exception to that at all. From talking to the RaceSim Studio Brain Trust over on the official Discord, I was told that work on this car actually began all the way back in March of 2019. So that predates the releases of 3 installments of the Formula Hybrid series, plus 2 experimental installments, and one other RSS Classics release. That would be the F90, which we got a year and a bit after that. So this car has been built in gestation alongside with the F90, at least for the first year of its design process, if you want to call it that. And then it's been honed ever since. So nigh on 3 years of development time went into this car before Racing Studio had truly established themselves as the avant-garde statement and standard of Assetto Corsa mod design. They've been working on this thing, and of course, with other releases, not of the Formula Hybrid series, but RSS Supreme, for example, that we got late last year. That car was a paradigm shift for these guys in terms of the overall fit and finish of everything. A lot of the brain trust that has been accumulated starting with Formula Supreme has been carried over into this, also into updates of Formula Hybrid 2017 and 2021, migrated through the Supreme program, and now this one is a complete ground-up manifestation of the latest and greatest of what RaceSim Studio can give us. This thing, though, it is something else. We've got a very Mercedes-esque livery on this one, and yep, number 47 on there. Once again, RaceSim Studio were very kind and considerate to want to put my name on this car, as well as the names of other server boosters. I believe that's who got the first picks on these on the RaceSim Studio Discord. So if you were a server booster, you had the opportunity to put your name and number on this car if you wanted. Thank you very much for that, as always. I've been on a lot of these by now, but I always appreciate it. It's always pretty cool to see your name and number on something in the sim world. However, in addition to this, we have got a whole bunch of stock liveries that come with this car. We've got these Mercedes-looking ones. We have got this 2012, 2013 looking Lotus version. We've got a 2010 Renault sort of livery here. Very, very nice stuff going on. Going back, we have got the Force India back in those days. Remember when we had Force India? Yep, they had these colors for a while. Generic blue, which looks real cool. These McLaren-looking sorts of liveries. I believe this is chrome out in game, but I haven't actually tested that yet. But that would look real cool in chrome, and I like the big RaceSim Studio colors, of course, on it. The generic yellow looks kind of Renault-esque, perhaps a 2009 sort of look there. Another McLaren-looking sort of skin. And then, of course, Red Bull versions. They're not obviously Red Bull, but you can definitely see the design influence in the colors and the graphics on the livery. It looks very good. We've got a white version as well. This one, actually, I was told that this one was modeled after that special one-off that Coulthard ran at Interlagos in 2008. Of course, Red Bull have since run white liveries again, most notably 2021 at Istanbul. They ran a white livery. It was supposed to be for the Japanese Grand Prix, but that didn't happen, so they ran it in Turkey instead. Looks very nice. And we have got another blacked-out Red Bull-esque sort of livery here. Very, very nice, and that about covers all of the different skins that come stock with this thing. I know that third-party skin painters have already started working on this, and I believe that there's been a Ferrari skin already released. And of course, the one car that we already had in Assetto Corsa, most comparable to this one, was the F138 Ferrari that came with the red pack all the way back in 2016, 2017. I think it was 2017 that came out. But that car's been all alone for a long time in terms of having peers. That problem has been addressed, but just taking a look at everything here, you can see that it is definitely fit and finished in the style of 2012, 2013. Looks really cool. Those exhaust outlets there integrated into this Coanda ramp on the rear side of the side pods on both sides. Remember, V8 engine, 2 banks of cylinders, and therefore we have got 2 exhaust outlets on the car. Big departure from what you see nowadays with just a single turbo, and then, of course, the single wastegate exhaust out the center of the F1 cars today. At the center of this one, you've just got a big tunnel that's blowing some reasonably low pressure but very hot air out the back over the beam wing area there. And you can even see that there is a radiator, probably a gearbox oil cooler nestled in there very nicely. So there's a lot of detail to see on this car. Of course, we won't even really begin to scratch the surface of how much time and effort went into the detailing on this thing, but you can see that it is all here for close examination if that is what you indeed wish to do with it. We can, though, go into the cockpit and just give you a general idea of what you're going to see from inside once you're out on track. Apparently, the showroom is taking us through a scenic route, so it'll give you a nice little overview of the car as we make our way in. Looks like we're going to drop in from above. Don't mind if I do. There's a T-bar with cameras on it, facing front and rear as you would expect. And now coming down into the office. We're sitting a little bit high from where we'll be driving. However, there's that steering wheel. Again, you can definitely see Red Bull design influence here. Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber both ran steering wheels very much in this shape and size back in the day. And it looks very good. We've got some instrumentation available for us on a steering wheel. In addition to all the buttons and lights, of course, that red bar across the top with the two green lights to its right, that's your KERS. Remember, these are technically hybrid cars as well. Not hybrid in the sense of the power generation itself is hybrid, but press button, receive boost to the tune of 160 horsepower for 6.6 seconds per lap. That's what you get there. And that red bar will slowly tick down from right to left as you expend your per lap allotment of KERS. So you've got that. Very much appreciated. Above, it's turned off right now, but you are going to have that standard LCD unit showing you gear position, your speed, and fuel level. And then there's a second page to that you can actuate by pressing the headlight switch, wherever you've got that mapped in your control output, to show you what your live delta is. It doesn't give you a number, but it just gives you a plus or minus, so you get a rough sense of what you're doing compared to your best lap of the session. Looking down in the cockpit, we've got the typical RSS detailing, and we have got all sorts of good stuff here, texturing. Excellent carbon look on the cockpit sides there. That's carried over, I believe, from Formula Supreme, where they debuted a new carbon fiber rendering, and it looks absolutely fantastic here. And then, of course, we have got the two RSS chassis plates sitting there on the left side of the bulkhead. Definitely something that I appreciate, and it's become an RSS signature trait. The car isn't done until it's got a chassis plate and they sign off on it. Fantastic. Mirrors there, you don't really see these when you're out on track just because of the way that I've got my FOV set up, but you may have different preferences in terms of your FOV, or if you're running VR, mirrors probably become a little bit more useful for you. But absolutely great stuff. Cockpit surround, obviously no halo, but we have the raised sides of the cockpit. That was something that was homologated starting in 2008. Back there with the cushion, stop the helmet from banging against the backside of the monocoque. And the inlet snorkel there for the engine. Two cameras on either side with that little beam wing, and then across the top the T-cam as we're accustomed to seeing. Fantastic stuff inside and out here on Formula RSS 2013 V8. And we're going to take the scenic route leaving the cockpit as well. Won't complain. And I will just remark here, on these liveries, they've all got sponsors on them, of course, as you'd expect, but we're actually seeing real-world sponsorship on these cars now, and that is just something that is incredibly encouraging as far as not only Race Sim Studio, but sim racing in general. Of course, 2020, with things being displaced in time, as there were, of course, big delays in real-world racing getting underway, many championships anyway, sim racing started to come to the forefront, and it started to attract the attention of a lot of real-world companies. And you can see now, and it's not new for this car in particular, but it has been new for Race Sim Studio in the last couple of years. We've got actual sponsors here. We've got FSR, Formula Sim Rigs. They do sim racing equipment in terms of seats and desk setups and clamping systems, all kinds of things. And I believe they also make a seat that was modeled in the cockpit of this car, so that's real cool. SimuCube, they make steering wheel controls and things like that. Very, very cool. Autodesk, obviously, it's a CAD software package prominently displayed here. Pretty sure RSS uses Autodesk in the design of many of their cars. Brilliant stuff. So we're seeing real-world companies on these make-believe products. Not make-believe in the sense of, yes, they're real products, and yes, they do generate real-world revenue, but we've got real companies advertising in the virtual space, and it's something that's really unique, and it's not something I ever really thought I would see in sim racing, but this has become a much bigger deal these days, and we're starting to see it. It's definitely a really cool development. However, enough blabbing for me. How does this thing drive? Let's answer that question. Stand by. Welcome to Catalunya for our shakedown here of the RSS 2013 Formula V8, or the Formula RSS 2013 V8. These names are a little bit confusing, but the product is brilliant. Absolutely it is. Here it is in the natural light here, booted up in the pit lane on the medium tires here by default. Absolutely great stuff through and through here, now that you can see the car bathed in the glow of late morning sunlight here in the pit lane. Great, there's our rain light flashing away there as the pit lane speed limiter would be punched up. Great stuff through and through on this car. We'll take a little bit of a look just around here in the cockpit and get you situated in terms of what it is that you're going to be seeing as we're out on track, as everything is alive, but of course no fuel on board right now. Cockpit is brought up to life with our ignition switched on, of course, and now you can see everything going on here with this steering wheel and that dash display. It looks great. All these lights come on. You've got all kinds of brilliant stuff here. It's great. First of all, you can see on that display, the dash in the center there, we've got those 4 flashing reds. That shows that the pit lane speed limiter is active and all of that good stuff. On the steering wheel itself, you can see the KERS status lights there in terms of charge remaining, as well as the KERS availability. If we deploy KERS, you'll see a second green light come on. We can't do that until we're running, though. In addition to that, we have got our gear position indicator, of course. There's the N in the center on the dashboard proper. We go up through the box, and obviously you get all of that action all the way up into 7th gear, and then down, back into neutral, and reverse. If you look on the extreme left-hand side of the dash display, the fixed display in the center, you'll see that this blue light comes on. There it is. That is the neutral light. So whenever you're in neutral, that neutral light comes on. That also comes on for a fraction of a second between gears most of the time. So interesting. Obviously, the gearbox is passing through a neutral position as it's punching up the next gear. So really cool stuff. Other than that, though, there are those rear view mirrors. You can kind of see them on either side. And, of course, as you go into corners here with the neck effects running through the CSP, I've got a little bit more head movement than you'll get with a stock AC going on, but not too bad. And that's about it in the cockpit. You don't have screens. You don't have MGU deploy settings because you don't have a motor generator unit because it's a naturally aspirated, almost non-hybrid car. Very, very cool, but still very, very techy in terms of all the stuff that it's got going on under the skin. Back into the setup screen, though, what do we have here? Pretty much par for the course for Assetto Corsa. Our gears first, obviously, 7-speed box, so gears 1 through 7 lined up there, as well as final drive ratio. All of these are adjustable to your heart's content, but default setup is shown here. Tires, we're on the soft compound, not the mediums, as I had mistakenly said before, but we have got them in Azure compounds available. We've got the softs, obviously. We've got super softs, mediums, hards. So we have got how many compounds? 1, 2, 3, 4 tire compounds to choose from. The default setup puts you on the softs. Fuel, that is zeroed out to keep the engine quiet, but maximum fuel capacity, I want to point this out to you, maximum fuel capacity is 220 liters. And if you notice there, on the right-hand box where it's talking about the ride height, you can see that we are at 23 millimeters from a 25 millimeter minimum. So that means that we can't drive on full tanks without doing a little bit of suspension adjustment. So just be mindful of that. Remember, no refueling in this era, so make sure you've done your calculations right so you know how much gas you're going to need to get to the end of your race distance. Aerodynamics, not too much here, but front and rear wing angles as you would expect, and you can see the default values there, 16 front and 8 on the rear. However, the range of adjustment is from 1 on the front to 20 on the front, or 0 on the rear, and 10 on the rear. So there you go. Brakes, brake bias, and brake power, nothing really to write home about there. Default to 56% bias to the front. Drivetrain, differential adjustments here in power, coast, and preload with the default values. I like to open a diff up pretty much maximum, so you can go all the way down to 0 Newton meters preload there, or a maximum if you really want to just lock up the rear axle for whatever reason. Perhaps you're running around on ice and snow. You could go up to 250 Newton meters there if you would so desire, but we're not going to touch any of that for our first run anyway. Camber and toe in all 4 corners here, default values shown. Second suspension screen, we've got anti-roll bars front and rear with wheel rates and ride heights, as well as travel ranges for our push rods on the front or pull rods on the rear. Pull rod rear suspension on this car, as we're still seeing in the F1 cars today. Third suspension screen are dampers for our fast and slow bound and rebound, and then the fourth suspension screen with our heave springs. These are the springs mounted top side there on top of the gearbox casing as well as on top of the bulkhead there on the front end behind where the nose mates up to the monocoque just controls our heave rate. That is the bound and rebound up and down in the z-axis. Bump stops here just ultimately the travel range limiters there, the little rubberized things that the suspension arms run into at the extreme ends of their travel. Various steering assist, power steering. Don't touch this, or you can touch this, but I don't touch this, so that just gives you an idea of what the default setup looks like on this thing. Right, so we are default setup. We're going to return our fuel level to our default of 50 liters. There we go. And in the cockpit, we are. Engine is fired. We've got our pedals in the lower left, as always, so you can get a sense of what my inputs are. Everything else you should be able to read from the car itself. Catalunya to ourselves. Let's do this. Clutch in. First gear. Raise the revs a bit. Clutch bite is very early in his travel, but it's very progressive thereafter. Get up into all the gears. And we'll start to build some tire temp here. I did not have the tire warmers active. You can, of course, use them. I don't use them because they're cheating. Building some brake temp, building some tire temp. Careful you don't scrub them too bad. Here's 6 and 7. That's where understeer followed by oversteer can set in if you're not careful. Turn 8. Lots of grip through there as well. Big downforce corner, that is. If you're listening carefully on some of these downshifts, you might hear a little bit of a machine gun type sound. What is that? Well, 2013, not so much, but in 2011, we had off-throttle exhaust blowing going on with these cars. And they did that through some trick engine maps where they were cutting the fuel delivery to the cylinders, but they were hanging the throttles open, so the engine was acting like an air pump. And it was just sending energized air through the diffusers, even when the drivers were off throttle, and it created a bit more downforce. It also tended to create some interesting sounds out the backs of these cars, particularly the Red Bulls, and believe it or not, the Caterhams. Renault engines in both, they had some of the most prolific off-throttle exhaust blowing solutions. Very distinctive noise. A lot of people get all nostalgic about it. However, Racing Studio explicitly said that they were not going to do a 2011 car for the very reason of those sounds. Not because there's anything wrong with them, but because it's just not something that they like. And I kind of understand why, because they've become something that has created a whole lot of misinformation in the Formula One fan community, particularly in the newer communities. It's undermined the actual innovation of exhaust blow diffusers, which came out in the mid-'80s rather than in 2011. And it's just generally turned into something that amuses 12-year-olds because they sound like flatulence. So, something unique, something distinctive, but not something good, not something dignified. Hence, Racing Studio did not do it. And I 100% concur. However, as we've gotten some heat in the tires now, we can rev it out to the max. DRS open. 7th gear, 290. 300. Coming up to the rev limiter. There's the rev limiter. 312 is all she wrote in terms of our gearing in this setup. Tires are not 100% there yet, so a little bit of understeer there at low speed, followed by some oversteer as we try to get back on the throttle. However, the soft compound tires will come into their own in about another half a lap. We can start to get some performance out of this thing. Washing out a little bit still. DRS open here through the second DRS zone on the lap. Little bit of oversteer there associated with heavy power application. Bounced into the air over Jean's sausage. Gotta use all the track on the exit. A little bit of brake bias forward. Let's go to page 2 on our display. We are below the delta, as you can see. Need a little bit of a confidence lift just to get the left side tires, particularly the left rear, to dig in a little bit more through turn 3. Not bad. But I am now feeling confident. I feel like the tires are switched on. The car is going to do more or less what I want. What does it do? What does it handle like? What's it feel like? What's being communicated to me through my eyes and through my hands? Well, first thing is grip. Lots of it. This is a 2013 car. It's 9 years old. It is very much representative of the state-of-the-art of automotive aero design even today, despite the FIA always trying to hinder the Formula One engineers as much as possible. The thing makes a ton of downforce. The aero really starts to come in pretty much immediately. There's no real lag time in terms of the transition between mechanical and aerodynamic grip. It's nothing at all like the F90 or the F2000 in that regard. The efficiency and the effectiveness of the aerodynamic designs on these cars, I still consider these to be reasonably late model. It's really something to behold. It's always working. Something like the F90, for example, it doesn't really feel like you've got wings at all below 100 miles an hour or so. But this thing, you get it out of first gear and it's already starting to bite into the track. It's great. That said, on default setup, you do get a fair amount of understeer, particularly under braking. In fact, I want to bring the brake bias back rearward a touch. And a lot of that is down to the tires. I mean, these tires are very good, don't get me wrong, but they're a generation or so removed from the tires that you have on, say, the Formula hybrids. They're also smaller. They are physically narrower tires, and the cars themselves are physically narrower than they are today. This is 1,800 millimeters track. Modern ones are 2,000. So 200 mil, it actually is not insignificant, especially when it comes to the width of a car, because you just get that much more room to work the aerodynamics and to have displacement through your suspension for your dynamic weight transfer and things like that. So you will feel a little bit of a drop-off in terms of the ultimate performance on this relative to, say, Formula Hybrid. That's to be expected, though. Such is life in Formula One innovation. These cars were only current for 1 day as far as the teams were concerned. They were constantly updating little things here and there within the extent that the rules allowed. And when you've got a team that year upon year produces a brand new version of its prototype design, things get left behind very quickly. However, if you are willing to suspend your disbelief of the calendar and say, yeah, it's still 2013, yes, this thing is going to give you exactly the sort of experience that you'll remember seeing on television. The way the car is reacting to your inputs, very convincing. The sort of style that Sebastian Vettel used to great effect in this era of having a very strong and very sure turn-in definitely works in this car. That style very reminiscent of Fernando Alonso in the mid-2000s, where he kept the rear end planted by being very aggressive on the steering. That's also what Sebastian Vettel did, in conjunction with how planted, aerodynamically speaking, the rear zone of these cars was. You definitely can see how Sebastian Vettel managed to win 4 world championships. terms of tractability, drivability on the engine side of things, it's fantastic. It's actually, I think, more drivable than the Formula Hybrids because, of course, it's a naturally aspirated car, this is. So there's no turbocharger, there's no turbo lag, therefore. Not that there's really turbo lag in the Formula Hybrids, but there's just a touch of disconnect between what you're doing with the throttle and what's going on out of the rear axle in those. In this, nope, it's one-to-one. You give it beans, and it gives you beans back. Overtook that a little bit. Very, very cool. Go back to our main page here on our display. There we go. Our fuel level is 31 liters. So not a whole bunch of information on this one in terms of what you get instrumentation-wise, but you get enough. Considering your attention, by and large, is not in your own cockpit, but it's well down the road as far as your eyes can see, it's more than enough. See, there's two green lights on the steering wheel coming in when we've got DRS activated. That's good. Give us some curves out of the final corner. Watch that center bar. There we go. Green light on. See the curves is ratcheting down. Across the line, it goes back up. Not going to use the curves down the straight here because we hit the rev limiter without it. Little curves here coming out of turn 3. Very cool. You can't adjust anything with the curves. You can't adjust the deploy other than turning it on or off. And that's a press and hold toggle function. It does regenerate under braking off of the rear axle, just like the modern hybrid systems, but there's no MGU. There is no motor generator unit, really. There is just basically a generator unit on the rear axle, which turns into a motor, but it's intermittent. It's not constantly running. And of course, it's not deploying unless you tell it to deploy. Get 6.6 seconds per lap of that KERS boost. You don't have to use it all at once, obviously. Then when you cross the line to begin another lap, it has regenerated and you're allowed to use it again, up to 6.6 seconds. That was a bit squirrely. Yep. No problem. You can see that the car is very controllable. I mean, when you are at the limit, yes, there will be some snap oversteer as airflow gets detached around the rear zone and through the diffuser as well, I would imagine, particularly with the exhausts routed where they are, and they're trying to blow those ramps on the rear sides of the diffusers, of the side pods, rather. Flow will detach and you will lose some aero efficiency there and thereby some downforce, but when you're hard into the throttle, when you've got some speed, the thing just grips and it will never let go. Again, it's those transitional zones, the medium to low speed stuff, while you're really dialing in some steering lock, while you're getting onto the throttle. That's where the thing can step out on you. And that's when you just need to be aware of that. Once you are aware of that characteristic, though, you just prepare for it, and drive around it if need be, and you're on your way. There's just so much going on here, though. Not in terms of overwhelming you from an instrumentation perspective or a car control perspective, but there's so much under the skin here that I know we just are not quite aware of yet, with this being such a new car and with us not really taking an in-depth look at things today. But you know that this is something that has been gone over time and time again with no expense in terms of time investment spared. It's a premier level product once again from RaceSim Studio, and I definitely can tell right away that there's going to be a lot of replay factor going on. I haven't raced it yet. I don't know what it's going to be in terms of AI, but RaceSim Studio's AI have been pretty good as of late, so I am very hopeful. And of course, those of you who like to run online, I think you just found a very nice new friend. Back into the pits with us. Stopped. And we will do our pseudo shut-off by stalling it in reverse. But there it is. Formula RSS 2013 V8. It is the latest addition to the RaceSim Studio lineup. And it's brilliant. It's another RSS Classics. It has got itself so many great features inside and out. And of course, it looks pretty cool too. And it's really it's going to be something that I think a lot of us are going to take to very quickly. I mean, I have not much more experience in this car than anybody else who's currently in the market for it. But I've taken to it really quickly. I haven't crashed it yet. Haven't spun it yet, accidentally anyway. And I think it's exactly what you think it is. It's got a lot of downforce. It's got a lot of torque. I should say, obviously, we're modeled after the Renault engine here in terms of the sounds as well as the performance. The Renault engine, the V8 anyway, was known to be rather torquey. This has got plenty of torque in reserve if you need it. And it just makes this car very drivable and also very approachable. Aside from those transitional zones where you're trying to get onto the power at medium speeds or so, and you're not quite sure if it's going to stick. Aside from that, you've got yourself a lot of mechanical grip, despite the thinner tires than what we're used to today, in addition to just an absolute boatload of aero grip going on. I mean, just take a look underneath this thing for a second. Yeah, you see that diffuser? Uh-huh. Yeah, you've got a lot of air passing through this car at any one moment, and it's going to conspire to create a lot of aero help to get you around any corner you want. So yes, it's got a lot of performance. I think there's a chance it may well hang with some of the early Formula hybrids on some tracks anyway. Certainly not all of them, but where you've got some medium to high-speed corners, it might just happen. Formula hybrid will be far and away quicker down a straight, of course, but I think that this might give it a run for its money just in terms of the stopwatch on a lot of circuits. So just put that in perspective. The modern cars to 2019 through 2021 anyway, this is approaching that sort of atmosphere. So it's definitely absolute tip-top performance-wise. So be prepared for that if you're not quite used to these kinds of cars. It's not something that you're just going to jump into if you're not really experienced with this sort of a car. But if you are, you're going to take to it like a glove does to a hand. It's going to be great. At any regard, though, I will leave you with some hot laps without me barking over them so you'll be able to hear those sounds both from onboard and external views. And yeah, go and get this car in the meantime. RaceSimStudio.com. You can find out all the information you want about how to spend your €3.80 as of release day for the privilege of driving this car in Assetto Corsa. It's a brilliant machine. You're not going to be sorry for getting this one for your collection. Until next time, though, I do thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for the hot laps. Ferrari Matt 601 saying thanks, and of course, we will see you soon.